Nabalanke Sangalola Yatsam Dish the legend issue in Nga Chuchidojin. Taringe Lenje Saronange legend di Nang Niedong Yishu Sum Dabashive Tse Junin Pimi Dixugi Dene Kangjin Kishung Sikung Zogandu Kashag Judubi Pumi Yikja Peki Mong Ginsung Sheba Unje Nang Yobade. Tade Kashag Judubi Mune Yikjeti Hajang Kene Chimbushi Yimbekor Trezo Nangdang Shijaka and Lopaka Tishin Sanju Gulum Sola Modern Nangdang Nangmula Den Shamla Pende Sikung Pembasiring Choki Yikjeti Kor Yinge Nang Lariang Shugu Yinge Nang Motor Session Nambashik Kube Pimbi Dajane Sudan Dang Chukti Shubashik Since Yoma Shugu Dang Chubjik Shunke Sola Jimbe Kangmang Yoma Shu Tochiche.
On behalf of the 16th Cabinet and on my personal behalf, I wish to extend a very, very warm welcome to all of you from Dharamsala. Today, we are going to discuss a little more in detail about the vision paper, this book that we launched on 10th April, and this is called Securing Tibet's Future, a vision paper. I'm taking this time out to explain the contents of the vision paper to the non-Tibetan speaking audience, particularly the younger generations of Tibetans who has to understand how the Central Tibetan administration is intending to move forward into the future and how do we secure our future. Any government or administration will or have to have a vision paper like this, and I understand that this is perhaps the first vision paper by a cabinet. Through this paper, we hope that the Tibetan advocates will have a better understanding of how the Central Tibetan administration and particularly the executive of the Central Tibetan administration intends to move forward. We have divided this vision paper into 4 parts. One is the introductory part, which also explains about the geostrategic importance of Tibet and the environmental importance of Tibet and cultural importance of Tibet. These 3 things are very useful to understand the basic information about Tibet, and this can also help you in your advocacy work to explain to people about Tibet. Through this paper, we hope that the Tibetan advocates will have a better understanding of how the executive of the Central Tibetan administration intends to move forward, and this can also help you in your advocacy work to explain to people about Tibet. Oftentimes we tend to believe that people around the world know about Tibet, but unfortunately that is not the reality. We have to explain Tibet, we have to explain the people of Tibet, we have to explain about the history of Tibet, and we have to explain about the current situation inside Tibet to the international community if we have to be effective voice for our brothers and sisters inside Tibet who are suffering under the Chinese occupation. Tibetans define Tibet as the land surrounded by snow mountain ranges. And when Westerners started coming into Tibet, they called Tibet as the roof of the world because of its altitude. Asians referred to Tibet as the water tower of Asia because all these major rivers that flows into the neighboring India and Pakistan, like the Indus and the Satluj, or the Brahmaputra that comes into India and Bangladesh, or the smaller rivers that flows into Nepal, or the Irrawaddy or the Salween that flowing into Burma, and the Mekong. originating from Tibet and going into Burma, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, and Vietnam, 5 different countries in Southeast Asia. 2 lifelines of China, the Yellow and the Yangtze, also originate from the Tibetan Plateau. Apart from the North Pole and South Pole, Tibet has the largest amount of glaciers and permafrost that feeds all these major rivers. Therefore, any change in climatic conditions on the Tibetan Plateau will have severe consequences, not only to the Tibetan people, but to all the neighboring countries around Tibet. We have decided to focus on the historical status of Tibet as an independent state to create the right value for the middle way approach. Even though we stick by the middle way policy, these days when we travel around the world, we are not taking Tibetan historical books. We take these 2 books, one by Michael van Walt van Praag and his partner Mick Balthius, called Tibet Brief 2020. Now, in his book, what he tries to establish is whether it's Tibet-Mongol relationship or the Tibet-Ming relationship between 1368 to 1644, when China was ruled by the Chinese themselves, the Han Chinese. We had 3 rulers in Tibet, the Pamadrupa for about 100 years, Rinpoche for about 100 years, and Devazangpa for about 100 years, till 1642. Then the Mings were overthrown by the Qings, who are the Manchus. So the Manchus ruled China from 1644 to 1911. Tibet was ruled by the 5th Dalai Lama from 1642, 2 years before the Qings overthrew the Mings in China. So what Michael tries to prove is that whether it's Tibet-Mongol relationship or whether it's Tibet-Ming relationship or Tibet-Qing relationship, or as per international law today, Tibet has never been considered part of China. Many people believe that since Tibet right now is occupied by the People's Republic of China, Tibetan language also might have something to do with Chinese language, but unfortunately that is not the case. Tibetan language came from India, and Tibetan Buddhism also came from India. We must have had the biggest transliteration house in the world in 8th century when we translated every available Sanskrit text into Tibetan on the advice of Shantarakshita, the Indian master who visited Tibet around that time. And we are very proud to say that we are a repository of important knowledge system which is relevant not only to the situation those days, but it's much more relevant today in the 21st century, when we hoped or expected this world to be much more peaceful, but unfortunately it turned out to be the other way around. Therefore, the cultural influence of the Tibetans is also very important to bring in more peace and stability in the whole region. Since we came into exile, the first Prime Minister of India, Pandit Nehru, advised His Holiness to set up compact communities and set up separate Tibetan schools. Compact communities came up in different parts of India and Nepal, and because of these compact communities, we were able to establish our own schools and monastic institutions and cultural institutions. Unfortunately, now more and more younger people are moving out of these compact communities, so there is a threat to the survival or the sustenance of these compact communities, which is very, very essential for our cause. That is why building back compact communities or repopulating compact communities is one of the prime areas where we are preparing for the worst, even if we have to struggle for the next several decades. Considering the reality of the situation inside Tibet, His Holiness the Dalai Lama started thinking about the middle way approach, which is a Buddhist concept, avoiding extreme polarities. And in this case, one polarity is the situation of Tibet, the historical status of Tibet as an independent state. On the other polarity is the situation of Tibet under the occupation of the People's Republic of China. So we have to find a middle way whereby the Tibetans will have the freedom to practice its religion, promote its culture, its way of life, and protection of its environment. So these are some of the essential components of the middle way, whereby Tibetans will have the freedom to protect and practice and promote their own identity. Most of the civil servants are very, very young people. So even though they have very good qualifications, they may still be lacking in knowledge and decision-making processes. So it is very important for us to empower them, make them understand the nature of their job, the surroundings, and expose them to as many situations as possible so that they will be able to handle problems. The civil servants themselves will also have to spend some time to understand our situation, to read books as much as possible, understand the past so that we can move forward into the future. And we are also thinking, of course, there have been a lot of workshops. Sometimes we feel that there is a overburden of workshops on civil servants, but then it has to be designed in such a way from the time of recruitment to training to embarking on their regular jobs, they have to be empowered in a manner that they can use all the free apps for database, and there are many things that can be used to increase your capacity. All means will be adopted to make sure that civil servants gain the capacity that they are expected to in fulfilling or rendering their services. We have decided to focus on the historical status of Tibet as an independent state to create the right value for the middle way approach. Even though we stick by the middle way policy, these days when we travel around the world, we are not taking Tibetan historical books. We take these two books, one by Michael van Walt van Praag and his partner Meek Balthius, called Tibet Brief 2020. Now, in his book, what he tries to establish is whether it's Tibet-Mongol relationship or the Tibet-Ming relationship between 1368 to 1644, when China was ruled by the Chinese themselves, the Han Chinese. We had three rulers in Tibet, the Pamadrupa for about 100 years, Rinpoche for about 100 years, and Tepazangpa for about 100 years, till 1642. Then the Mings were overthrown by the Qings, who are the Manchus. So the Manchus ruled China from 1644 to 1911. Tibet was ruled by the 5th Dalai Lama from 1642, 2 years before the Qings overthrew the Mings in China. So what Michael tries to prove is that whether it's Tibet-Mongol relationship or whether it's Tibet-Ming relationship or Tibet-Qing relationship, or as per international law today, Tibet has never been considered part of China. It is of utmost importance for us to understand the situation inside Tibet and be able to tell the international community as to what exactly is going on inside Tibet. China employs all kinds of artificial intelligence, whether it's in the form of electronic identification or geolocation or DNA profiling of the Tibetans or iris scanning of the Tibetans. All these are meant to use against the Tibetans to control more and more. And then the next step is, how do we change the younger generations of Tibetans into Chinese? And that is exactly what they're doing through the colonial-style boarding schools. The management of the monastic institutions have been taken over by multiple security agencies. So Tibetans have no say in the management of monasteries. Tibetans don't even have a say in where they want to go. You need at least 4 or 5 different permits if you are traveling across Tibet. Information is one area that Chinese government controls all the time. In terms of Tibet, it is all the more difficult because in the last several years, nobody has been able to move into Tibet. Nobody has been able to come out of Tibet. It is in a way totally shut down from the international community. Uniting the Tibetan community is the prime importance when we move forward. How do we do that? Now, one is securing democracy, because democracy has been given to us on a platter by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, whereas in any parts of the world you have to struggle for democracy through your tears, your sweats and your blood. But in our case, it was a totally different scenario, His Holiness granted democracy based on how much we have been able to adapt to the changing responsibilities and circumstances. So this is a very precious gift from His Holiness, and it is incumbent upon us, the generation that has taken the responsibility now, to make sure that the future generations of Tibetans also continue with the same democratic processes and govern ourselves. The 16th Cabinet has come out with this platform for every single Tibetan to come on a common platform to work on the cause of Tibet. In future, nobody can tell us that there was no platform. I wanted to do something, but there was no platform for me to do anything. The platform is very much there. Now, how much you want to take part in that or not is your decision. So as a Tibetan, facing the kind of challenges that we are facing, compact communities getting dispersed and then Tibetans being relocated to different countries around the world, is definitely quite a challenge. But the opportunity is also, because of the dispersed Tibetan population, and these Tibetan population also having adopted citizenship of other countries, have the right to vote and also the right to request their representatives to represent their case. So this opportunity cannot be missed, and it is a very important platform that we have created, which we intend to nurture. There will be many more youth forum meetings, regional meetings, international meetings, where you will be taking part and take the lead in the resolution of the Sino-Tibet conflict in the future, if it is not resolved during our lifetime. How many Tibetan people read Tibetan history? How many understand Tibetan history? If Tibetans don't read Tibetan history, no one else will. People have too many things to while away their time in this modern age. So therefore, I urge every single Tibetan to look at their own history, study their own history, and be in a position to be able to debate with others on historical status of Tibet. Whether you are a proponent of independence or whether you are a proponent of middle way approach, aim everything at Chinese government. There is no necessity to fight amongst ourselves to reduce our own strength. And we are only 130,000 Tibetans in exile. So if we remain disparate in many ways, then our strength will be weakened. And that's exactly what the Chinese government wants. This is the first section where I've tried to focus in your advocacy work when you explain to other people about Tibet, about the geopolitical significance of Tibet, as to why Tibet matters, why Tibet is so important for the whole region. And if we are able to resolve the Sino-Tibet conflict through the middle way approach or the policy, then this could contribute a lot towards bringing more security and stability in the whole region, in Southeast Asia and Central Asia. So thank you very much for listening, and please do have a look at the vision paper. Please go through this document as much as possible, and I'm sure as I speak, Tibet.net will also display the link on Tibet.net where you can have access to these documents. Thank you very much.